This presentation is brought to you by Arizona State University's Julianne Wrigley Global Institute of Sustainability and a generous investment by Julianne Wrigley.
Every time we fill up our car with gas, we are pretty painfully reminded of the economic implications of energy. But my concern, which I've raised, I hope, in speeches and articles and countless discussions, is also about the national and international security implications, the critical geopolitical role of energy. As a security challenge, access to energy and to fuel can be a diplomatic pressure point and can be, has been, and is used as a geostrategic weapon. Consider, for example, the following. Nearly 40% of the natural gas and a third of the oil that Europe consumes comes from Russia. And over half of the gas that the Ukraine uses comes from that same source. The world's energy infrastructure also offers targets for the maritime instability that I talked about earlier. At the request of the Libyan government, our Navy SEALs recently boarded and took control of a tanker in the Mediterranean that was full of stolen oil. And every month, we hear reports of oil piracy and energy theft in the Gulf of Guinea off the west coast of Africa. And shrinking Arctic ice is opening up new sea lanes at the top of our planet, new potential areas for resource exploration, and new potential areas for friction. And even with domestic oil production up, even with imports declining, and even with new oil and gas reserves being discovered, energy remains a security and economic concern for the United States. Because even if we were able to produce every single drop of oil and gas that we needed domestically, we can't control the price. Oil is the ultimate global commodity, and it's usually and often traded on speculation and rumor. As an example, in the aftermath of the chemical weapons attack in Syria last summer, oil prices surged to over $107 a barrel and remained there for weeks. It's what oil traders call a security premium. So when a crisis anywhere in the world occurs, just look at Egypt or Libya or anywhere, the price of oil spikes. Just last week, Bloomberg News reported the crisis in the Ukraine was creating uncertainty. And that's a word that always drives up prices for commodities like oil. Every $1 increase, every $1 in the price of a barrel of oil costs the Navy $30 million in increased fuel cost. Now, this has huge implications across the Department of the Navy and the Department of Defense, and huge implications for our security. The Department of Defense is the largest single institutional consumer of fossil fuels on Earth. And we spend about $15 billion. Well, we budget about $15 billion every year for fuel. In the last two fiscal years that we have complete numbers for, 2011 and 2012, price spikes added another $3 billion in unbudgeted fuel price increases to the DoD fuel bill. Now, the bills from that so-called security premium can mean that we have fewer resources for operations, for training, and if the bill gets too high, we'll have fewer platforms, so fewer ships, fewer aircraft. In addition, the cost of meeting our high fuel demand can also be measured in the lives of those guarding fuel convoys. During the height of operations in Afghanistan, we were losing a Marine, killed or wounded, for every 50 convoys of fuel that we brought into theater. And that is too high a price to pay. So for all those reasons, in October of 2009, I announced 5 energy goals for the Department of the Navy in order to improve our energy security, increase our strategic independence, increase our sustainability, and advance our operational capabilities. The top goal commits the Department of the Navy to generate at least half of all its energy needs afloat and ashore from non-fossil fuel sources by no later than 2020. And we are going to meet these goals. We're going to meet them through a number of programs, including a variety of alternative fuel initiatives, and also through greater energy efficiency. It'll make us better at our jobs, better warfighters, and it will make us and the world far, far more secure. Those fuel convoy statistics are one reason that the Marines have been some of the most aggressive leaders in sustainable energy over the past few years. Now, when you think of Marines, you probably don't think of ardent environmentalists. But, as always, Marines are leading the way in proving that renewable energy, so making the energy where you are, increases combat effectiveness. And this was proven in actual combat in Afghanistan. Using their Experimental Forward Operating Base Program, or XFOB, they've developed alternative energy sources from the private sector that help reduce their dependence on those fuel convoys and on traditional sources of energy like diesel fuel and batteries. In the fall of 2010, 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines deployed to Sangin in Helmand Province in Afghanistan. Now, at that time, Sangin was the center of a very, very tough fight. But 3-5 Marines took some items from this XFOB process and they saw a pretty dramatic impact. A foot patrol using small, light, packable solar panels so they could use them to power their radios, their GPSs instead of batteries, could go for 3 weeks without a resupply of batteries instead of having to be resupplied every few days. And also, one company of 3-5 shed 700 pounds of batteries that they didn't have to lug around Afghanistan. It made them more agile, it increased their potential range, but it also meant a dramatic cut in the need for those resupply convoys and a cut in Marine casualties guarding those convoys. So in actuality, alternative energy saves lives. Once they tested the equipment, and they tested it in the ultimate way in combat, we turned it around and we put it into production. Today, it's a standard part of every Marine's equipment. Entire battalions are equipped with these new energy technologies like solar and LED lights for their tents and solar generators at forward operating bases. So from infantry units to sniper teams to special ops, this equipment is now being used by us all over the world. Alternative energy makes Marines better warriors. Every 2 years, we have the biggest naval exercise in the world, the Rim of the Pacific, or RIMPAC. The last time we had one, in the summer of 2012, the entire Nimitz strike group, everything from surface ships to every type of aircraft that took off from Nimitz, were flying and steaming on a 50-50 blend of biofuels and jet fuel or marine diesel. We called it the Great Green Fleet. It was almost exactly 100 years after the Great White Fleet. Now the big news out of that exercise was there was no news. We bought biofuels, we put it in our normal logistics chain, we got it to Hawaii, we put it on a supply ship, we took it to sea. We didn't change a single engine in a single aircraft or ship. We didn't change a single setting on an engine. It was absolutely seamless, absolutely transparent. The engines, the aircrafts, the ships couldn't tell the difference. And that's one of the keys. Only the source of fuel should change. Whatever replaces fossil fuels has to be, for our ships and our aircraft, a drop-in fuel. Nothing changes in any engine. And that's because we have almost all of the fleet either at sea today or being built that we're going to have in 2020. And we have most of the aircraft that we're going to have in 2020. To change those engines to accommodate other fuels like liquid natural gas would be astronomically, prohibitively expensive. So new, more sustainable energy sources are critical.
This presentation is brought to you by Arizona State University's Julianne Wrigley Global Institute of Sustainability. For educational and non-commercial use only.